September 11th is a date that for many reeks of cover-up. That is especially true for Jeffrey Weinhaus, a journalist in Missouri who on September 11th, 2012, was shot 4 times by a Missouri police employee and will spend the next 25 years in a cage for it. Sound insane? That's because it is. Much content exists about this incident at Coplock, a fact referenced by shooter Henry Folsom, but this video seeks to highlight key points in Weinhaus' situation and explain what happened during his 3-day trial. Be forewarned, a lot of information is presented. You may need to rewind parts or watch the video a second time, and with this and everything, do your own research and think for yourself. Before we delve into the details of the unjust September 11th shooting, let's go back a bit. Jeffrey Weinhaus had for years published content in print and online. He sought to expose dirty politicians and corrupt governmental actors. Weinhaus was candid in his demeanor and often made references to the Constitution and to his faith. On August 16, 2012, Weinhaus published to his YouTube channel a video entitled "The Party's Over," in which he stated that area and justice system actors were operating outside their prescribed bounds.
The America that I grew up in is long gone. Now, the good news is it can be restored, and it can be restored peacefully if the powers that be just simply walk away.
Weinhaus called for them to step down by September 17th, Constitution Day, or else the people would remove them, try them for treason, and hang those guilty. One man who saw the video was Kelly Parker. Parker sometimes wears black robes and refers to himself as the court. He claimed that Weinhaus' speech was threatening. Mind you, YouTube, which has a policy against content that threatens others, didn't yank the video. And Weinhaus never sent the video to Parker or anyone directly, and he had no cases in front of Parker. Yet Parker's worry eventually involved Henry Folsom, who worked out of Missouri State Highway Patrol's Troop I office. That information is not disputed by anyone, but the way Folsom got involved is curious. In a February 2013 hearing, Robert Parks, the Franklin County prosecutor, said that Parker had contacted the governor's office, who then contacted the colonel, the top dog at the Missouri State Highway Patrol, who then contacted Folsom. Yet in October 2013, during Weinhaus' trial, Parks instead claimed that Folsom had received a call directly from Parker. Why the change? It seems pretty significant that involved in the timeline of Weinhaus' unjust shooting were the folks atop the hierarchy of Missouri's political system, Jay Nixon, and law enforcement apparatus, Rep. Logel. A thinking person may conclude that they sought to distance themselves from the fallout. What is certain is Folsom's involvement. On August 18, 2012, 2 days after Weinhaus uploaded "The Party's Over," Folsom and a couple FBI employees watched the video. They concluded that most of what Weinhaus had said was protected as free speech. Folsom's inquiry should have ended there. Yet, police tend to escalate situations, which is exactly what Folsom did. Folsom, joined by his partner Scott Mertens, went to the Piney Park home Weinhaus shared with his then-wife Judy and her teenage son Levi. Folsom knocked, Weinhaus opened the door, stepped outside, and closed the door behind him. The trio had a conversation for almost half an hour in the driveway. Weinhaus maintained that he was a peaceful person. Folsom asked to be able to search the property, which Weinhaus denied. Yet Folsom stated that he had smelled marijuana when Weinhaus had opened the door. Judy was told to come outside and wait with Weinhaus under the watchful eye of Mertens and a couple of local police employees as Folsom left to get a search warrant. 4 hours later, Folsom returned. His quest took longer than expected because at least one judge opted not to sign the search warrant. The warrant was notarized by Robert Parks. Folsom and Mertens entered the property and found a small amount of marijuana and 1.5 morphine pills. In addition to those substances, Folsom and Mertens also took Weinhaus' computers and cameras.
And they basically came and stole my First Amendment right the other day by seizing my computers because they smelled pot. So I guess my computers were smoking pot. I really don't understand the logic of that.
It appears that Folsom sought entry primarily to take Weinhaus' equipment. Folsom was so driven to silence Weinhaus that he had failed to act according to his statutory requirement to notify the sheriff of the county of his actions.
There is a statute that requires that, and we were notified before the warrant was issued.
Folsom admitted he was aware of that requirement, but that he didn't have cell service. This calls into question the legality of the search, the theft of Weinhaus' computers, and the subsequent charges levied at him. Deprived of the tools of his trade, Weinhaus was upset, and rightly so. Weinhaus was a journalist. He had dozens of advertisers from area businesses. How is he supposed to create and publish content?
And one day, very soon, we're going to be able to turn that flag right side up because we're not going to be in distress anymore. We have every right, duty, and responsibility to replace the government today because they have failed their chief design. And when they can come into the office of the publisher and steal his computers, they got to go.
Weinhaus focused his attention on the person responsible. He emailed Folsom and demanded his computers be returned. Weinhaus said he would sue unless he was made whole. He called Folsom's boss, Sean Satterfield, and denounced the invasion of his property. And he rented a computer and made public the situation. Satterfield, by the way, is in the Army National Guard with Kelly Parker. A couple of weeks after stealing Weinhaus's property, Folsom met with Satterfield and others. Their discussion centered not on how to correct the wrongs they had caused, but how to further escalate and compound them. The next day, September 11th, Folsom called Weinhaus and told him that he would return his computers. They arranged to meet at the MFA gas station up the road from Weinhaus's residence. Weinhaus was ecstatic. A short time later, Weinhaus stopped by the MFA for as usual, a pack of Marlboro Reds, a fountain drink, and $5 of gas, then headed out. Heather Clark, the clerk, noted that Weinhaus was in a very good mood and had told her that he was getting his computers back. But, as Weinhaus would later find out, the return of his property would be, as Folsom called it, a ruse. About an hour later, Folsom and Mertens arrived at the MFA station. They parked their white, unmarked Impala in the gravel lot. Accompanying them were two FBI employees, Mark Mayushak and Patrick Cunningham, who parked closer to the building. Missouri State Highway Patrol Severus was parked south of the station in case Weinhaus fled, and their colleague Keithley covered the north exit. Before heading to the scheduled meeting, Weinhaus, not too trustful of those who claimed to serve and protect, had checked case.net to see if there were any outstanding warrants for him. He saw none. On the way to the MFA station, Weinhaus called his ex-wife. After they spoke for a bit, he placed his phone, still on, into his pocket. She recorded the audio from her school computer. Weinhaus was also recording from a watch recorder on his left wrist, and he had a camera in his car. Around 1 p.m., Weinhaus pulled the Subaru he was driving into the MFA parking lot. He stopped near the Impala so he wouldn't have to carry the computers far, and exited. Folsom had already stepped from the passenger door as Mertens stepped from the driver's door. Folsom instructed Mertens to open the trunk of their car to continue the ruse that Weinhaus's property was going to be returned. Weinhaus stood near the driver rear of the Subaru. Folsom, who was left-handed, walked toward Weinhaus holding a manila envelope in his right hand. In his report, Folsom claims that he told Weinhaus he had to sign the papers to get his property back. But the recording proves that Folsom never mentioned these papers.
How's it going, Jeff?
Good, how are you?
You got the gun for?
Why I got the gun? What you got the gun for?
Because I'm an authorized gun.
All right, well, I'm authorized to
Get down on the ground.
Get on the ground.
Get down on the ground.
You're going to have to shoot me, man.
Weinhaus was open carrying, something that is completely legal in Missouri. His pistol set inside an Army paratrooper holster. Only after a ring is pulled downward and disengaged can the flap be swept out of the way to clear access to the pistol. You cannot fast draw from this kind of holster. In fact, Folsom later acknowledged that he owns the same paratrooper-style holster and admitted that they are very hard to open. Folsom then claims that Weinhaus started to unholster his weapon and face him. Weinhaus said, "You don't have to shoot me, man," though those wearing badges claim that Weinhaus said, "You're going to have to shoot me, man." Folsom claimed in his report that he told Weinhaus to get his hand off his gun. Again, due to the recording, we know that never happened.
How's it going, Jeff?
Good, how are you?
You got the gun for?
Why I got the gun? What you got the gun for?
Because I'm an authorized gun.
All right, well, I'm authorized to
Get
have
down on the ground.
Get on the ground.
Get down on the
You're
ground.
going to have to shoot me, man.
Folsom claimed Weinhaus had drawn his weapon an inch out of his holster, so he shot Weinhaus. 2 shots to the chest and 1 to the head from about 7 feet away. Blood came out of Weinhaus instantly and his eyes rolled back. Mertens followed the lead of Folsom and fired, twice. However, he admitted that he didn't feel threatened and that he never saw Weinhaus's pistol come free of the holster. Marty Leach, who was repairing a gutter on the MFA station, looked over upon hearing the gunshots. He too said that Weinhaus's hands were empty. Folsom then fired a 4th shot into Weinhaus. Weinhaus fell flat on his face. Did Folsom, quite literally, jump the gun? It sure seemed so. After Weinhaus had dropped, Folsom suggested an ambulance be called. Mertens radioed Troop C via the radio in his vehicle. That radio transmission was followed by a response from an unknown Missouri State Highway Patrol employee who said, "They're messing with Weinhaus again." To which Missouri State Highway Patrol employee George Seals replied, "Not over the radio." Weinhaus was pretty much left for dead. Folsom noted that, other than rolling him onto recovery side, I didn't do any further medical aid. The ambulance arrived about 9 minutes after being requested. A short time later, Weinhaus was helivac to Mercy Hospital, 50 miles away. He had lost 4 pints of blood and suffered brain damage due to the lack of oxygen. He spent a month recovering, then transitioned to his brother's house and continued treatment. Why had the shooting occurred? By his own admission, Folsom stated that he didn't believe Weinhaus a violent person. He and Mertens had left their bullet-resistant vests in the back seat. But Folsom self-describes as a disabled veteran. He's already shot another person who died while employed at the Missouri State Highway Patrol. He told Satterfield and his other supervisors that he did not want to be involved with the case, citing the pushback he'd received from Weinhaus since entering his property. According to Jeff White, the chief firearms instructor for the Missouri State Highway Patrol, Folsom's interactions with Weinhaus, some of which he felt laden with hostility, would change definitely his perception of the potential danger that was there. Yet despite the fact that it was absolutely not policy for the trooper who was the subject of personal criticism to serve an arrest warrant, Satterfield said to Folsom that because he had started the case, he would finish it. Satterfield also told Folsom not to involve those from Troop C, who had jurisdiction in the area. Why was Sean Satterfield so adamant that Folsom forge ahead and act outside of policy? Perhaps because Satterfield had a personal interest in silencing Weinhaus? Weinhaus had been running for coroner of Crawford County. If elected, Weinhaus promised to reopen investigations into 2 killings done by a Crawford County deputy, Paul Satterfield, the cousin of Sean Satterfield. Did Sean Satterfield task Folsom with silencing Weinhaus to protect his cousin? After the September 11th shooting, those at the Missouri State Highway Patrol put on a unified front, and Folsom was cast aside. He received a written reprimand from Rep. Logel and was placed on extended medical leave. He was told he could not don his weapon or costume, and that he'd be guilty of insubordination if he showed up to work. Folsom stated in no uncertain terms that his employers didn't do their jobs and that they had turned their backs on him. Meanwhile, the wheels of the injustice system continued to spin.
There's nothing new I can give you on your recorded device right there, other than what's out right now.
The wrongs done by one actor, Folsom, were compounded by others incentivized to protect the perceived legitimacy of their institution, most notably by Robert Parks. In an obvious attempt to control the narrative, those questioning the September 11th incident were directed to none other than Parks. At the Troop I office, out of which Folsom had worked, those questioning the incident were given a pre-printed memo.
This is what we've been told to tell anybody with the investigation.
We're not going to be answering any questions or comments about this case. I'm going to direct you again, as we've been directed by the prosecuting attorney. If you have any questions, just contact him.
At the Troop C office, where those tasked with investigating their colleagues worked, Johnson, the same Missouri State Highway Patrol employee put out front and center in Ferguson to try to quell discontent, was trotted out. He too pointed to Parks as the gatekeeper for information.
I had never heard Peter say that the prosecutor said, I will never release information. He said at some point. So that's kind of where we are.
Yet Parks was not too transparent, eager instead to cage Weinhaus.
I can't comment on the case till after the trial is finished.
Okay. You don't see a conflict of interest, the fact that the investigation is...
When, on November 1st, in the middle of his treatment, Weinhaus walked into Legal Land, he left in handcuffs, thanks to the actions of Parks, who called Weinhaus a danger to the community. The day before Weinhaus was scheduled to have a hearing about his motions to dismiss, Parks assembled a grand jury that indicted Weinhaus on 8 counts, including multiple felonies. Weinhaus argued that he hadn't missed a legal land date in 25 years, and pointed out the hypocrisy in the bond amount. He was supposedly a danger to the community, but he could walk free if he had lots of cash. Weinhaus rightly asked, "Why am I the one in handcuffs? I didn't hurt anybody." Fast forward to October 8, 2013. Weinhaus, caged without trial for almost a year, now had his day in Legal Land. Over 3 days, a dozen individuals were tasked with deciding Weinhaus's guilt or innocence. During the Legal Land charade, the accusation that Weinhaus had tampered with a judicial officer, which had been cited as rationale for his home visit and computer seizure, was tossed. There's got to be something more than just the podcasts, the judge said. Also, Count 8, that claimed that Weinhaus had resisted arrest, was tossed.